Trying to be like them white folks.
I know, right? And go. Okay, so Dawiyad, you stand by and be ready to read until Amayetaza comes in. Now, so we're picking up where we left off in Romans chapter 11, and where we left off in Romans chapter 11 was verse 11, which basically the brother who asked the question actually was generated around issues of verse 11. And since he had the question, I decided to break down the whole chapter, because believe me, later on, questions will have generated around whatever verses we didn't cover. So that's why we just went on to break down the whole chapter. So we're going to go ahead and get to Romans chapter 11 and pick up Romans chapter 11, and we're definitely, or verse 11, and we're definitely going to be thorough, right? We're not going to skim through it, because that's the whole purpose of having, of answering the question. Having asked the question, I want to make sure that this lesson is in you guys' archives. So we're at chapter 11, Dawiyad, of Romans, and I want you to read, please, verse 11.
Wow. Romans chapter 11, verse 11.
You may want to come just to scoot your chair a little closer. The sound is okay, but just to make sure, it's a bit right. It's a bit low.
Romans chapter 11, verse 11. Let their eyes be darkened, that they may not see, and bow down their back always.
That's verse 10, but still, what this was, and these are the last verses, so I should say these are the verses that we covered in the last class session that we dealt with Romans chapter 11 before we veered off into other topics, other more pertinent at the time topics. So go ahead and hit verse 11.
I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? The Most High forbid, but rather through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy.
Okay, now this one we're gonna be here for a while. This is in reference to Israel. When he says, I say then, have they stumbled? He's asking, has Israel stumbled that they should fall? That means, now you notice, when he says fall, he's saying, have we stumbled that we should be completely abandoned, completely severed from the Most High, completely disengaged, because the Most High tell you we became an enemy to him. He became an enemy to us through our rebellion. So Paul is asking, is that our final status? Is that our final state with the Most High? And he said, nope. Forbid the thought. But through their fall, through the fall of Israel, listen to this, salvation is come unto the Gentiles. Then it tells you why. For to provoke them to jealousy, meaning to make us jealous. So that be the issue. People be thinking that this word salvation that went to the Gentiles is the same salvation that was offered to Israel by the sacrificing of Yahushua and the believing on him as the Son of the Most High. But it is not. In other words, the fall of the nations, or the fall of Israel, through the fall of Israel, salvation going to the nations. That's what we're going to focus on this evening. Now, let me say this. What is the question, or what is the definition of salvation? And I'm going to tell you, because this isn't a dictionary definition. This is a biblical definition. Then we're going to go and prove it. All right. What was it that the nations got when Israel fell? They got deliverance from foreign rule and oppression. I'm going to say that again, and then we're going to go into the scriptures and prove it. What was it that the nations got that the Most High refers to as salvation when Israel fell? They were freed from, right, delivered from foreign rule or oppression. That's and the freedom and the liberty with the providence of the Most High to move forward in their, quote, predetermined or predestined trajectory. I'm gonna say that again. Having been freed, when I say foreign rule, we're gonna find out the rule was actually from us. And all the subsequent nations that would what? That would rule after us, this was what they got. There hasn't been a period of time where the Most High allowed vacuums in power to exist. What do I mean when I say that? Well, Daniel chapter 7 tells us about the succession of the four final empires, referring to them as the four beasts. There was no vacuum power. There was, in other words, the Babylonians didn't simply collapse and then there exists no geopolitical successor. Babylon didn't fall. Babylon was taken down by the Persians, just as the Babylonians had taken down the Assyrians. And so that's what the salvation is talking about. In other words, when Israel fell, what happened? An age that Christ refers to as the time of the Gentiles was entered into. When Israel fell, and remember, Israel didn't fall overnight. So this is what I'm going to show you. So now listen. Deliverance from foreign rule or oppression. This is the first thing we're going to go to so that you can see that that's what it's talking about. Now, when I say deliverance from foreign rule or oppression, there's one word that gives you that. The one word that, and it isn't salvation, but it's what the Bible is talking about. The word is sovereignty. The word is sovereignty. They were made sovereign. They were no longer, and the scriptures tell you who it was that they ruled, who it was that they were ruled by. They were ruled by Israel. We'll show you that in Revelation chapter 11. So before we do that, let's go and quantify this salvation being free from foreign rule and or oppression, and that they would what? Become the oppressors. They would become the rule. So Wisdom of Solomon, now go to Wisdom of Solomon in the Apocrypha, and you're going to read, start off at verse 1, Dawiyad. We don't have to read the whole lot. I think it's going to be verses 1 through 5, maybe 4. I'll see. I'm headed there now. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6. Yes, and I want you to start off at verse 1 and read to verse 5.
Chapter 1, right?
Yes. No. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6, and verse 1 through 5.
Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6, verse 1. Hear, therefore, O ye kings, and understand. Learn, ye that be judges of the ends of the earth. Give ear, ye that rule the people, and glory in the multitude of nations.
So you hear that? This ain't addressing Israel. This is addressing all the other nations. Go ahead.
For power is given you of the Lord, and sovereignty from the highest. Who shall try your works and search out your counsels?
Now stop right there. For power is given you of the Lord. And what? And sovereignty from the highest. So that means they was what? They were given freedom from Israel. They were given freedom from who the Most High now. And this goes all the way back to, why do I say, see, let me say this. This goes all the way back to Genesis 27. It goes back farther than that, but I'm going to say 27 now because you can see what that the Most High did. Let's go there real quick. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. When I say free from foreign rule and oppression, we were the ones that ruled over them. And that was the result of the blessing that Isaac gave to Jacob. What was the blessing that Isaac gave to Jacob? That he would be what? That his brothers, that he would rule, or that his brothers would all serve him. Now remember, Jacob didn't have any brothers but Esau. Right? But it says brothers plural, because it was referring to all the nations of mankind. And Isaac did that. So real quick, we're not going to read the whole chapter. We're just going to read, let me put me a marker here. We're just going to read that in chapter 27 of Genesis that pertains to the blessing. We're going to read the blessing that Isaac blessed Jacob with, that he had intended, right, to bless Esau with, but Esau didn't get it. Esau got outmaneuvered by his own mother and his twin brother. All righty. Dawiyat, what you could do is you could let him sit where you are. You reading for me, so you sit there. That would be perfect. Thank you. Hey, shalom, brother. Shalom, my water.
Shalom, Mike. Shalom, sir.
How you doing, brother? Pariah, right?
Yes, sir. How you been, my brother?
I'm been good. I been fighting. We got who knows how many more days we got in this kingdom. Esau is ramping things up. So I'm not gonna lie, brother. I'm great. I have too many prophecies fulfilling from Monday through Friday. This thing is, literally overwhelming in the spirit. Okay. Dawiyah, you're going to read Genesis chapter 27, and I want you to start off at verse 19, and you're going to read from verses 19 all the way down to 20 to 29. Now, our target verses are verse 28 and 29, but the reason we're starting off at verse 19 so that we can capture, right, the sequence of events. Now, what are we doing? I told you we're going to be thorough. When we read Romans chapter 11 and verse 11, and it said that through Israel's fall, salvation came unto the Gentiles for to provoke us to jealousy, for to provoke Israel to jealousy. I'm explaining how the salvation that came to the Gentiles is not talking about the transaction that was made when Christ died for us. It's talking about Israel having fell out of power and having fell from the grace in the eyes of the Most High. The nations were given sovereignty. The nations were made free from rule from Jacob. And so this began, people don't get it. This is cold. When did the fall begin? Who knows that? When did the fall of Israel, the fall that is today of Israel begin? Do you know that, Dawiyat?
Answer is no. Can I give a guess?
You can guess if you want to. I prefer that you rely on your knowledge. But no, go ahead.
Fall of Israel today, right?
The fall that led to where we are today, where did it begin? Because when you read fall, it sounds, just because of the word fall, like we'll read the rise, what is it called? The book, I'm trying to think of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. So you'll read the word fall and you think that it's talking about a moment, but it isn't. It's talking about a sequence of events that can be traced back to probably one or two events. Now that's what you could do with Rome. Rome's fall started off really with in the year of 192 AD with the historical phenomena called the what? Called the Year of the Five Emperors. They made the movie about Gladiator. That was actually that emperorship. Commodus, the son of Marcus Aurelius, he really did precipitate the fall. But that was 192, and the fall wouldn't come, the actual fall wouldn't come until when? Wouldn't come until 476 AD, man. So with Israel, once again, in Romans chapter 11, verse 11, it said, through our fall, through the fall of our forefathers, salvation came to the nations or came to the Gentiles. So when did that fall start is what I'm asking.
Say 70 AD, then I would say two answers, 70 AD, and then when Solomon passed his kingdom down to his son.
Okay, you got the right one, the second one. The 70 AD is to us what 476 AD is or was to the Roman Empire. That was when everything that led to the fall finally what? Culminated. But what you said, the second one, that's the true answer. It began not with it didn't begin with Solomon's son, it began with Solomon. It began in what? 1 Kings chapter 11. Where Solomon, don't read, just write it down. Write it down. 1 Kings chapter 11 is where Solomon's apostasy is recorded. And his apostasy wasn't that he had all of them women. His apostasy was that he set up groves and allowed them and he himself to do idolatry to all of his wives' gods. That was what his crime was. And that's a whole different matter for the law to check out. Wasn't wrong with him. The scriptures say that, like I said, we'll go into that. That's a lesson for another day. So when it says the fall of Israel, salvation came to the nations, that means the first nations to receive independence or sovereignty from Israel, you'd have to read it. Who were we residing over in the time of David? Moab, Ammon, the Canaanites, the Philistines. David had made it down to certain sections, not very deep, but into Egypt. He didn't go and recover the borders that are mentioned in Genesis that go to the Euphrates River. He didn't go up into the land of the Hittites. All of that is mentioned. But those borders that the Most High gave Abraham, our forefathers never fulfilled that border. But that which we did reign, that in that quote, that region, and not very far outside of it, Moab, Ammon, and Esau. Syria, certain sections of Syria. So when you go and you read the scriptures, who were the first ones? The Most High brought Syria up out of it and brought up, adversaries to Solomon. So when it says salvation came to the Gentiles, it's not talking about an event. It's talking about a series. It's a series of events. It's talking about a process that was set into motion with Solomon's idolatry. And that culminated in what? 70 AD. That is what it's talking about. So that means as time went on, nations became sovereign and began to set up their own kingdoms and then expand into their own empires. And that was what? The first one that we were affected by after Solomon's apostasy was so many hundred years afterward with the what? With the Assyrian captivity. And that's what was precipitated by his son. You understand? So this study includes all of that. Now, so go ahead and start off. We're in Genesis chapter 27. Now, why are we in Genesis chapter 27, getting ready to read verses 19 to 29 about the blessing that Jacob got? Because we're showing you, how can I put it? That it was Israel's birthright to serve, to have all nations on the planet serve him. And I don't mean the individual, I'm speaking of our person, our father, in the collective. So when I say Jacob, he's the one that received the blessings, but we're the ones that his descendants were the ones that would reap this blessing. So go ahead and read verse 19.
This is 27, verse 19. And Jacob said unto his father, I am Esau, thy firstborn. I have done according as thou badest me. Arise, I pray thee, sit and eat of my venison, that thy soul may bless me.
Go ahead.
Isaac said unto his son, how is it that thou hast found it so quickly, my son? And he said, because the Lord thy power brought it to me. And Isaac said unto Jacob, come near, I pray thee, that I may feel thee, my son, whether thou art my very son Esau or not. And Jacob went near unto Isaac, his father, and he felt him and said, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he discerned him not, because his hands were hairy, as his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him.
So this was because his mother had Rebecca had decorated Jacob to feel like and smell like Esau, his twin brother. Go ahead, cold-blooded, right? Go ahead.
And he said, art thou my very son Esau? And he said, I am. And he said, bring it near to me, and I will eat of my son's venison, that my soul may bless thee. And he brought it near to him, and he did eat. And he drank, and he brought him wine, and he drank. And his father Isaac said unto him, come near now, and kiss me, my son. And he came near him and kissed him. And he smelled the smell of his raiment and blessed him and said, see, the smell of my son is the smell of the field, which the Lord hath blessed.
Now in Isaac's mind, he's blessing Esau. Go ahead.
Therefore, the Most High give thee of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and plenty of corn and wine.
Now stop. That's talking about the wealth of the earth that the earth would produce. That's what those words mean. Now read on down. Verse 28, read verse 29.
Let people serve thee, and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be every one that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee.
So so the first one was the wealth of the world and all of its resources that it has to offer. And verse 29 is talking about all nations would serve him. That's what our purpose is. You read that in Psalms chapter 2. Psalm says, ask of me, and I will give thee the heathen for thy inheritance. They're ours. It tells you that in Second Ezra chapter, what is it? Second Ezra chapter 9. It tells you that be not curious how the wicked shall be punished, but inquire how the righteous shall be saved. Whose the world is and for whom the world was made. So what it's telling you was what the nations, when we fell in Romans 11, they got all of that. They got sovereignty. They were released. I'm gonna prove it to you. They were released from being under the yoke of having to serve us. That's what verse 29 lets you know that was their purpose. What does it say? Let people serve thee and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons, plural, bow down to thee. No, yes.
So is it safe to say this is pre-Deuteronomy 28?
Well, let me say this, it's not safe to say it is. We read Genesis, but here's the point. You have to understand Deuteronomy 28 was nothing more than a series of admonitions and warnings that we violated. There was Deuteronomy was warning us in the case of disobedience, those quote anomalies would happen. That's why they're called curses. So that means our blessing this blessing, of course, was conditional. But it's the default setting. I'm gonna put it like that. The Most High's default plan was that Israel have the nation, have the planet, and that all nations serve him. And that the ultimate goal was that we serve as the priest class, the nation that would be the priest of all the other nations. We would be the conduit through whom all the other nations would have access to the Most High. And that's what the prophecy says it's going to get back to. So this thing called Deuteronomy 28 is an anomaly in the sense that that's not what we were made for. And Deuteronomy 28 presents it like that. Like, if you don't obey, this is what's going to happen. Letting you know that that's not that wasn't the Most High's purpose for us. So once again, now let's dissect this. Go back. You're going to come back here again and we're going to read what Esau got, but I want you to go back and read Romans 11 and 11 again.
Romans 11 and verse 11. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? The Most High forbid, but rather through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy.
Yeah, so salvation came to the other nations. The Most High used that as a strategy to make us jealous. And so the salvation that is talking about, once again, is not speaking of the deed that Christ did by dying on the cross and offers us salvation. This is talking about the salvation that they did, once again, was being freed and delivered from foreign rule. When I say foreign rule, we were the outside nation that ruled other nations. And that's why we read Genesis 27 to show that was our purpose. That was our blessing, that they were made to be our servants. Let's go get a little bit more. Let me show you. In other words, what I'm trying to show you is I'm trying to provide some details or some depth, some substance for what you read in Wisdom of Solomon chapter 6 and verse 2 or verse 3. Well, actually, you read verses 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to read it real quick so you don't have to go there. Hear therefore, O ye kings, and understand. Learn ye that be judges of the ends of the earth. Give ear, ye that rule the people. This is what you'll see. And glory in the multitude of nations. This is talking about all the other nations because we weren't, even at this time, we weren't sovereign anymore. It says, for power is given you of the Lord and sovereignty from the highest, who shall try your works, I mean, you're going to be tested, and search out your counsels. I'm aware, all your plans, I'm going to be there. I'm a Yakazah, Shalom.
Shalom.
We're back in Romans chapter 11, breaking that down. And we're being very thorough, so we're not going to finish up by any means tonight. Tonight we're spending most of our time, if not all of this evening, breaking down verse 11 of Romans chapter 11. So that's where we are. And so far, we've read, you're going to bounce between Romans chapter 11, verse 11, Wisdom of Solomon chapter 6, verses 1 through 5. And right now, we're in Genesis chapter 27. And we'll say that again. Let me drink this water first. We are breaking down Romans chapter 11. We're in verse 11. We're going to be in verse 11 probably for the rest of this evening. And we're breaking down verse 11 using Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6, verses 1 through 5. And we're in Genesis chapter 27 right now. So we just got through reading Jacob's blessing. Now we're back in Wisdom of Solomon, and I want you to start off at verse 1 again, chapter 6 and verse 1. Now, what are we doing, Amayetazah? In verse 11 of Romans 11, it said that Israel hadn't stumbled that we should fall, but rather through our fall, salvation came to the Gentiles to provoke us to jealousy. So what we're breaking down is, what is that salvation? The salvation that came to the Gentiles is not speaking of the transaction that Christ brokered, right, with his death, which was to be able to pay the price to adopt us back to the Most High and set the foundation for him coming to save us. It's not that salvation. It's saying that when we fail because of our disobedience, that sovereignty and deliverance and freedom from foreign oppression and rule, which was us. Right. That's what the nations got. So what we're doing first in Genesis is first we prove what the nations get. The Most High said it right here in Wisdom of Solomon. So go there real quick again. Amayetazah, Dawiyad read a little bit, but I want you to pick it up from the beginning again. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6, verse 1.
Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6, verse 1. Hear therefore, O ye kings, and understand. Learn, ye that be judges of the ends of the earth. Give ear, ye that rule the people, and glory in the multitude of nations. For power is given you of the Lord, and sovereignty from the highest. Who shall try your works and search out your counsels? Right.
So now when it says sovereignty, Amayetazah, this is what I've been wanting. So now we found out, we know what sovereignty is. Amayetazah, but now that we got you, put the definition of sovereignty, of course, what it is to be sovereign, of course, on the screen, so everybody can see it. Listen to this. Okay. Number one, supreme. This is it's an adjective, I think. The A. Supreme in power, possessing supreme dominion as a sovereign ruler of the universe. So in this case, it's not speaking of the universe, it's speaking of every nation, its territory. Right? Supreme, superior to all others, chief. Then it goes, it's giving you the instance of the Most High. The Most High is the sovereign good of all who love and obey him. Let's go down to the noun. A supreme lord or ruler, one who possesses, listen to this, the highest authority without control. Now, who was given that when Israel fell? The nations. The first one to receive it over us were the Assyrians, and they received this over the northern kingdom. Then the second nation, right? Don't get me wrong. It happened with smaller nations. You go back and you read, for instance, 2 Chronicles in chapter 18. What was 2 Chronicles in chapter 18 about? 2 Chronicles chapter 18 was about the king of Ahab, the king of Israel, whose name was Ahab, northern kingdom, received a visit from the king of Judah, whose name was Jehoshaphat. And the king of the north wanted Jehoshaphat to go to war with him against what? Against the Syrians to recover Gilead, to recover Ramoth Gilead. Why? Because the Syrians had conquered us and taken those places. Then you go and you read about Elisha and Gehazi. Remember, Elisha and Gehazi were used to heal Naaman, the Syrian captain, the one who the Most High used to whip Israel's ass in the north, right? To clear him of his leprosy. And when you read that whole excerpt, that whole time, it was the Most High. In other words, I'm trying to show you there were smaller episodes, right, where nations had gotten their independence from us and went on and took portions of our land. And that land is still in contention today. Other nations have adopted that quarrel. That's what the Golan Heights, the dispute with the Palestinians over the Golan Heights with the Syrians is about. Or I'm sorry, with the Israelis is about. The Israelis are thinking the Syrians. It's about Ramoth Gilead. And historically, in that chapter that tells you about Naaman, the Most High. And know what? I'm giving you this as I'm giving you too many sounds out. I'm giving you this so you guys can go look it up and read. But this is what the nations receive. This is the sovereignty that the Most High is saying in chapter 6 of Wisdom of Solomon, when he said, for power is given you of the Lord, and sovereignty from the highest, who shall try your works and search out your counsels. So I'm giving you those so that you can read, right? Because that wasn't the default setting of the Most High. Okay, Amaliyatazar, you're back in Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6. Read verse 3 on down to verse 5. Thank you.
Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6 and verse 3. For power is given you of the Lord, and sovereignty from the highest, who shall try your works and search out your counsels. Because being ministers of his kingdom, you have not judged aright, nor kept the law, nor walked after the counsel of the Most High.
And this is how you know they all knew it, because every kingdom that the Most High used to conquer us, especially of the West, of Esau, they all use the Bible as an instrument, as an extension of their respective conquests. All of the Latin families, so to speak, Spain brought the Bible but taught us Catholicism. Portugal did the same. France did the same. The Dutch, they did the same. They're Catholic. Then the Brits came over here and what? And pushed their what is it called? Anglicanism? I don't know, the Anglican Church. No, everyone used the Bible as an instrument of mental, right, and intellectual conquest instead of using it for what it was for. It was for teaching the laws and teaching true morality. So the Most High said, because verse 4, being ministers of his kingdom, that means servants. The term minister means servants, and the Most High used these other nations to fulfill his will against us. He said he would make us jealous using them, did he not? No. Hold on, I gotta tell these kids to be quiet. You're not very loud, but I think you So this is what the nations received, Doc, when we fell. They received, we're going through here to show you that this is what they have, and we're going to also read that they got it upon our fall. Now, the fall began with Solomon's reign. And remember, Solomon was top notch. Solomon was the king that historically was the wealthiest and wisest king, and he was so wealthy and wise that nations, the kings of the nations, would come to see if the rumors were true, and that the reality far exceeded the rumors. That the reality far exceeded the rumors. And so, but when did our fall begin? With that very same Solomon in his age. And so little by little, the Most High began to transfer that which was ours to the other nations. That sovereignty, he brought them out from under us and set them over us. Amayetazah, verse 5, please. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6.
Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6, and verse 5. Horribly and speedily shall he come upon you, for his sharp judgment shall be to them that be in high places.
And that's all the nations, the heads of states, and the puppet masters behind the scene, pulling the strings of the people that we see as presidents and prime ministers and things like that. The Most High is going to get them all. Now, I'm going to show you something else. So once again, through their fall, salvation came to the nation. Go to Luke chapter 21. Luke chapter 21, and I think I'm going to have you start off at verse 20. Let me get there and see. Yes. Read verse 20. Start off at verse 20, and you're going to read all the way down until verse 24.
Luke chapter 21 and verse 20. And when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh.
Now listen, this is where everything that would have begun, that would have began with the apostasy of Solomon would culminate to 70 AD. What Christ is reading right here, what set the desolation thereof nigh? What set that in motion against us? It all began with Solomon. And it culminated, Christ was prophesying about what it would culminate to in 70 AD. Go ahead, Amayetazah.
Verse 21. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out. And let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto.
This is just saying all the inhabitants that heed my warning. When you begin to see these things, leave. And those of you leave and flee into the countries or surrounding countries, being the land of Ham, known as Africa today, and all the kingdoms in that. Continue, Amayetazah.
Verse 22. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled.
Like you said, Dawiyat, Deuteronomy chapter 28 was getting ready to come down on us hard. Go ahead.
Verse 23. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. For there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
So what this is talking about is two things. It's talking about when Israel's decline would have completely finished, and now our fall is there. And then it would have put an end to what was let me put it like this, to a series of events that how can I put it, that tolerated, I'm going to use that word, that tolerated our existence. In other words, when did this go? Let me put it like this, our decline, when did it kick into high gear? It began with the fall of Samaria. That was when our decline kicked into high gear. The Most High took 9 whole tribes away. Then those that were left, right, the kingdom of Judah that consisted of Benjamin, Judah, and Levi, they would be subject to a series of four captivities when Christ came. In other words, the kingdom of Israel was not even allowed to come back. But Judah would be taken and put in exile by the Babylonians, allowed to come back. They would be brought down by the Persians. The Greeks would come and put extra hell on us. The Romans would come and put supernatural hell on us and then put an end to us. All of that was the true fall that began with Solomon. It all was about disobedience and idolatry. And so the nations by the time, so in 70 AD represents the nations, the Gentiles receiving complete what? Complete sovereignty and freedom from us, because not only were they freed from us, but we were dismantled as a nation. Our civilization was brought to an end. And that's when the salvation of the Gentiles came into full effect. Yes.
And that's why we kind of operate like this eternal slave. We just go like
they have not just that. Yes, you're right. But what's more, let's say, calling is that they have, remember what we read in Genesis chapter 27 and verse 28. Remember what Jacob was in verse 29, Jacob was blessed that all nations would serve him. But what was verse 28? Verse 28 was that he would receive the wealth and the abundance of the earth. So all of that, in other words, was relinquished. We were stripped of all of that. Everything that Isaac blessed us with in Genesis 27 that culminated in verse 28 and 29, we would lose it here in 70 AD. And all the places that we were scattered to before the fall, or before the fall of Jerusalem, in other words, we're talking about the Americas and other places, the Most High would send a sword after us and they would do the same thing. The Spanish would eventually come to this side of the world and do the same thing to us that the Romans did in Jerusalem. The Portuguese would come and do the same thing that the Romans did. The British, the French, the Dutch would come and do the same thing in this hemisphere. And then the rest of Europe, including the aforementioned 5 nations in England, right, everybody, would continue to go and search us out in Africa and Indonesia and Australia and New Zealand and Oceania. This is what the Christ referred to here as what? As the time of the Gentiles. That means Israel was completely wiped off the face of the earth. And this is why Paul said, have they stumbled that they should fall? Meaning, is this it for Israel? And he's like, no. Through that dynamic, the nations got power over us and got our blessings. That's what the salvation is referring to. They got the wealth of the world and us as servants until their time is up. But all of that happened just to provoke us to jealousy. Read verse, you're still in Luke, read verse 24 once more, chapter 21.
Verse 24, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, as the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
Now let's go do this again. Go back to Romans chapter 11, I just want to show you that this is consistent. Now that was what we just read was Christ prophesying, but Paul knew the same thing. So real quick, go back to chapter 11 of Romans and read verse 25. Don't worry, we're going to come back. We're going to break down the whole chapter. But because we're at this verse with this phrase, the time of the Gentiles, I want to show you Paul understood that. Romans 11 and verse 25.
Romans 11 and verse 25. For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that but like blindness in part is happened to Israel, unto the fullness of the Gentiles become in.
And read it again, a little bit more fluid, please.
For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in.
Now, of course, we skipped a whole lot of verses, right? Verses 12 through 24. But I only went here to show you the consistency in the message between what we just read in Luke chapter 21 and verse 24. That's saying that the Gentiles have a predetermined set of time to rule. And the reason they got that was because Israel, what? The Most High, we sinned and the Most High wanted to make us jealous. So he took what he had blessed us with, which was the wealth of the world and all the nations as servants, and he gave us to them as servants and our wealth. Like you take the necklace, that beautiful, priceless necklace from your lady, and you give it to your side chick. I'm gonna use that phrase since that's the popular shit these days. And your lady like, well, what are you talking about? You gonna give my jewelry to her? Because you ain't been acting right. That's why. And that's what the Most High did to us. And that process is called the nations having received salvation. It ain't talking about that transaction between the Most High and Christ and Israel. It's talking about they got that freedom and that sovereignty. Now we're gonna read one more verse to prove that we were over the whole world. So and this is hidden history that Esau won't relinquish, won't share, won't promote in universities or anywhere else. So go to Revelations chapter 12. No, it's Revelations, I'm sorry, chapter 11. Revelations chapter 11, I'm a Yetzirah, and you're going to start off at verse, start off at verse 1, y'all. I'm not going to try to I'm not trying to take us off track, but this, we have to read this all the way down to verse 10. Now we're gonna have to go other places to prove who's being spoken of. So I'm a Yetzirah, Revelation chapter 11, start off at verse 1.
Revelation chapter 11, verse 1. And it was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of the Most High, and the altar, and them that worship therein.
Now listen, I think we went over this already in our apocalyptic blitz. So in verse 1, I'm just going to give it to you, and you have to go and look for the apocalyptic blitz in Sword of Truth's YouTube channel, and you'll find it. So verse 1, the temple is talking about, generally speaking, all of the Israelites. We're the temple of the Most High, according to what? According to the whole Bible, but specifically 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16 and 17, right? 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 9. Hold on, let me find my place. The altar and them that worship therein. The altar is speaking of, in the Old Testament, it was the priesthood. In the New Testament, it's the apostleship. The Most High took the care of his nation, the believers, and took them out from the hands of the Levites and put them into the hands, the care of them into the hands of the apostles. So the altar represents all of those who actually teach about Christ. And when it says all them that worship therein, that's talking about the people who actually are following the truth. The temple is the nation. We're the temple of the Most High, whether we're obedient or not. We're the people, we're the nation that the Most High chose for his spirit to dwell in. But all of us are not righteous. So among us, you have a class that the Most High has set aside that here is represented by the altar. In the Old Testament, that altar was the priesthood. Today, that altar is the apostleship. And them that worship therein are those that are true to the teachings of the apostles handed down by Christ. That's what that verse 1 is saying. Go ahead. The reed like unto a rod is talking about the law of the Most High. I don't know if I ever broke that down from y'all. So let's go and quantify that. The rod is an instrument of correction. And the Most High tell us in chapter 2, what we're doing now is we're going to just prove, because I've never done this before, we're going to prove that what the rod is. When it says a reed like unto a rod, the Most High is asking John to measure Israel, but not like how many lengthen. He's talking about measure them. How do we say this? Give me an assessment, a moral assessment. That's the type of measurement. But what does the Most High refer to the law as? He refers to it as a rod. And I'm going to show you that. It's what's going to be used to break the nations. Amayetazar, Revelation chapter 2, verses, 24 and 25 or 25 and 26? Read it. It says, and they that him that overcome, right? Verse 26 and 27 is what it is.
Revelation chapter 2 and verse 26. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron, as the vessels of a potter should they be broken to shivers, even as I received of my Father.
Now you hear, what's the importance of this? Is letting us know that we're going to rule over the nations, but with what? And he shall rule them with a rod of iron. So let's go and find out what the rod of iron, that's Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. Go ahead and read it once you get it. It's Isaiah chapter 2.
Isaiah chapter 2, verse 1. The word that Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains. It shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it.
Now hold on. See, this is all nations going to who? Going to the Lord's house, Mount Zion. Go ahead. You'll see it. You're actually just going to read to verse 3. Okay, I'm yet to go ahead.
Yes. Verse 3. And many people shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the power of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem.
So that's showing you what is called the rod in Revelation chapter 2, with which the nation shall be ruled over. Here is really the law. Right? Y'all see that? So that is what the Most High is telling John in chapter 11 to measure us by. Who's following my laws? Who's keeping the testimony of Yahushua, my son? Measure them. Go to the temple. That's all of the nation. And I want you to start with the altar, the supposed teachers. You know why? Because some of the teachers today is telling niggas to take something. I can't do nothing. We can't lose our channel. I'm gonna put it like this. Many of the teachers today are advising Israelites in their congregations of some very poor and demonic medical advice. Let me put it like that. They're giving them very demonic medical advice. All right.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
We're gonna get through this, right? Ain't nobody's account getting suspended. The point is, and that's coming from the altar. Many of the representatives of the altar, the apostleship today, have allowed the dynamic of the cult of personality to be built and developed around them. Instead of pushing Christ, they're pushing them and their colors and their letters. IS this and IU that, and WB this, and my commanding this, and my bishop that. That's why the Most High said, measure the temple. That's all of Israel, whether believers or not. But now going to the altar, those are the ones that I have entrusted to what? To as the shepherds, as the stewards of my flock. And then to the believers, all them that worship there are those that have what? That whose minds have been enlightened. Now, are they sincere? Now that's what Revelation chapter 11 and verse 1 is saying. Let's go back to chapter 11, and read verse 2.
Romans chapter 11
and verse 2.
And verse 2. The Most High have not cast away his people. Which
No. Revelation. Revelation. We're still in Revelation. What I'm trying to show you, remember, what is it that we're breaking down now? We're breaking down that when it says Israel fell, salvation came to the nation, we're going to show you that the Lord tells you that those two kingdoms did what? Those two kingdoms, it says it tormented all of them that dwelt on the earth. Huh? Esau won't teach that history where we ran this rock. And that's what we lost when we fell. The Most High took those nations and our wealth and did the Eddie Murphy trading places on us. Yes.
Oh, you want to be all weird, bro, but what's that movie, Star Wars? Right?
No, I haven't, but I mean, I've seen it. I ain't seen it recently.
Okay, well, the idea behind the story was written by Caucasian Jews, right? Fake Jews. But in the story, Darth Vader is like this.
Oh, you said Star Wars?
It's Star Wars.
Oh, I thought you said Star Trek.
No,
man, I ain't seen Star Trek since I was a little kid, man.
No, but the idea of Star Wars is Darth Vader is this guy that rules the whole universe, right?
Right.
And the first movie, when you look at his little
it looked like an ephod.
It's an ephod. His ephod has Hebrew words on it. It has a Hebrew statement on it.
Oh shit.
That's a Hebrew statement. But they say that it was mirrored after the interpretation of the nations being ruled by this authoritarian figure, because all the black figures were representative of the priest class that had everybody in order, using violence and using warfare.
Right.
It was Esau's version of looking at us rule him. That's what Star Wars really is.
Hey, listen, and that's what all of them are. And everything from that to Independence Day to Hancock, a nigga from the stars that's got superpowers, that's invincible, whose only fucking weakness is the white woman. Shit, be real, y'all ever seen that movie Hancock?
Yeah.
In other words, there aren't very many movies made that doesn't carry the biblical theme of the battle between good and evil fought in the realm of men. Because in the spiritual realm with the Most High, there is no battle between good and evil. That's a battle where both principles are fought in the hearts and minds of men and manifested in their actions. But let's get back to it. Thank you. Now I gotta go back and look up. Do me a favor, Rob. We gotta get this. The suspense is killing me. Look up Star Wars, Darth Vader, Star Wars 1, right? The first one.
Yeah, look at me.
There's a statement in Hebrew. I forgot the statement was.
It probably says, "Stay asleep, niggas." That's the statement that's on the ephod. While he's looking for that, I will continue to read. So I'm at verse 2. I'm going to go and do verse 1 once more. And there was given me a reed like unto a rod. That represents the word of the Most High. It represents the law and the gospels. And the angel stood saying, "Rise and measure the temple of the Most High. Measure Israel, and the altar, and the apostleship, and them that worship it, and my flock, those followers of mine. But the court but the court which is without the temple, leave out. Meaning he said, don't measure that. But what does it represent? And measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months. Now, like I said, we're not breaking down this chapter. I'm trying to get to the point of how we rule and what it was we lost and what it is saying when it says the nations, the Gentiles received salvation, or salvation is coming to the Gentiles. Okay, so verse 3, now listen to this. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 2,000, they shall prophesy 1,000 or 8,203 days, cloth and sackcloth. Once again, we're not breaking down this chapter. Well, hold on, we got something. Let's see.
Oh, shit. It is. It's Assyrian. It's Assyrian Hebrew.
Hold up.
So that's what it looks like. And I'm gonna zoom in now.
Hold on. Okay.
Check it out. Yeah, I see that. If you yeah, you get it.
Okay, yeah. Zoom in on the big one, the one up top. Yeah, that's what it is. It's definitely the modern Hebrew.
Yeah, it's that Assyrian dialect.
But they call it Assyrian, but the Assyrians didn't speak that shit. I don't know why the elders used to say that. You know, that's if you got, I got my dictionary right here. The person, hold on.
It's Yod. I mean, I, Shala.
The Edomite so-called Jew who is attributed to having put that language together is, let me see, David, I'm trying to think of the guy's name. I think it's David Ben Gurion, but anyway, you get the Ben Yehuda's Pocket English Hebrew Dictionary. This is what we used to use way back in the day. I don't know if y'all can see this. Point is, that's what it really is. Thank you, Amiyatazar. Right? So the elders taught us Assyrian, but that's not Assyrian. It's not from the Assyrian civilization, right? But maybe they're saying that this is what we began to write after the 10 tribes got
I got this.
huh?
Got the statement. It says, it says, his deeds will not be forgiven until he merits. That's what the Hebrew inscription says.
His deeds will what?
His deeds will not be forgiven until he merits.
Merits meaning he does something that can absolve him of those. Like meritocracy, meaning you get or you receive for your merits, for your deeds, for your doings.
Huh.
So that's deep, but we can't get into that now.
Esau looking at Israel when they ruled them, and they had order, and they didn't like the fact that there's order. And then the Jedi, which was, Jedi is really us, like the term, the Houthi, you know that already. Yeah. Jedi, Judah.
Right.
Jedi, but they were fighting, but they weren't fighting for a structure. They wanted that anarchy, do it, basically do as thou will. We want to be free and do what they want to do. And Darth Vader's this asshole, all black priest that's killing people and putting people.
Well, remember, Darth Vader represent Cain. When you go into the other series, what was it what turned Darth Vader to the dark side was that he couldn't accept the fact that the Jedi life was one of sacrifice.
Yeah.
He didn't want to give. Remember, the person that, and I'm trying to think of the guy when he was young, Obi-Wan was saying, man, you You can't be afraid to lose.
God, you're right.
The dark side will take your fear of losing and exploit that. But what is that talking about? He didn't want to give the Most High the right sacrifice. So his sacrifice was Romans chapter 12. He had to be a living sacrifice to be a Jedi. You couldn't have no woman. You couldn't have no kid. Remember that shit. That was what the whole thing was. That's what turned him to the dark side, is when his true love got killed, right? And he thought his babies got killed as well, the twins, right? I don't know if they were twins, but it turned out to be Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker, motherfucking brothers and sisters. And they both were Darth Vader's children. But when their mother got taken, remember, that was what the Force did. Now that's enough of that shit, Dawiyad.
I'm done. It's not
Hey, I mean, we got to put some order to this class, man. They got my ass all pulled in. I'm like, now listen, now when you go to the return of the Sith, yeah, I'm all up in this shit now. Right? Because you already know what the Sith represent, that red motherfucker. That's Esau. Remember how he had the horns? He would work that staff saber. It's all there, man. Darth Vader, brother. Anyway, all right, that's enough. Zip it. Hey, listen, but thank you for that. But, you know, that's like wholesome to do. So what are we doing? We're finding out that the Most High in verse 1, he said, I want you to measure my people, whether they're following the truth or not, using the Bible. I want, in verse 2, you to leave out all the other nations because I don't have a covenant with them. And then he goes on in verse 3, read verse 3, please.
Verse 3. Oh no, verse 2.
No, I read verse 2. I read verse 2.
Okay. Verse 3. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth.
Now, just so that you know, the 42 months at the end of verse 2 is speaking of the same process of time that the 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. All of that is representative of the period from 1619 to 2000, from 1619 to 1969, actually. And that's a whole nother lesson. We'll get into that. Go ahead. Now listen, and I will give power unto my 2 witnesses. Dawiyad, I want you to dive in real quick. Isaiah chapter 43, verses 1 through 12 is going to let us know who the witness is. Then we're going to read why there's 2 of them. This is all just reiterating Israel.
Come on, Isaiah 43, verse 1 through 12. Now thus saith the Lord that created thee, O Jacob, and he that formed thee, O Israel. Fear not, for I have redeemed thee. I have called thee by thy name.
Now this is the Most High addressing clearly Israel, the nation. Go ahead.
Thou art mine. When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee. And through the rivers, they shall not overflow thee. When thou walkest through the fire, thou shalt not be burned.
This is talking about what we getting ready to go through now. The Most High is promising us he's going to be with us. Go ahead.
Neither shall the flame kindle upon thee. For I am the Lord, thy power, the Holy One of Israel, thy Savior. I give Egypt for thy ransom, Ethiopia and Sabia for thee.
He's like, I done already killed nations so that you could be free. And then the next verse, he's going to announce, I'm going to do it again. Go ahead.
Since thou was precious in my sight, thou hast been honorable, and I have loved thee. Therefore will I give men for thee, and people for thy life.
So he said he did it once, and he's going to do it again. Go ahead.
Fear not, for I am with thee. I will bring thy seed from the east, and gather thee from the west.
Go ahead.
I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, not back. Bring my sons from far, and my daughters from the ends of the earth,
Go ahead.
even everyone that is called by my name.
That means Israelites only. Go ahead.
For I have created him for my glory. I have formed him. Yeah, I have made him.
So listen to how he's reiterating his love and what his plans are for Jacob. Continue.
Bring forth the blind people that have eyes, and the deaf that have ears.
Now listen to what he says about all the other nations. Go ahead.
Let all the nations be gathered together, and let the people be assembled, who among them can declare this.
Who among all the other nations can say this? This is what he's letting you know. The things that I just dropped, who else can say this about Jacob? Read on.
And show us former things. Let them bring forth their witnesses, that they may be justified. Or let them hear and say, it is true.
In other words, he's going to tell you, no other nation can say this because I didn't do this for any other nation. No other nation can make this declaration. No other nation can verify if this is true or not. He's going to tell you why. Go ahead.
Ye are my witnesses, said the Lord, and my servant, whom I have chosen.
Now stop. Remember, why did we come here? Because we just read in Revelation chapter 11, verse 3, he says, and I will give power to my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,203 score days. So we're finding out who the witnesses are. So now we see he's talking about Jacob. You are my witnesses, Jacob. You are my servants, whom I have chosen. Continue.
That ye may know and believe me, and understand that I am he. Before me, there was no power formed, neither shall there be after me.
Go ahead.
I, even I, am the Lord, and beside me, there is no Savior. I have declared, and have saved, I have showed, and there was no strange power among you.
Go ahead.
Therefore, ye are my witnesses, said the Lord, that I am the Most High.
See, if anybody on this earth knows that I'm the Heavenly Father, you know it. You are my witnesses. Now, he was talking to Jacob. So in Revelations chapter 11 and verse 3, why did it say my two witnesses? I'm going to go to Ezekiel chapter 37. Ezekiel chapter 37 and start off at verse 15 and read down to verse 22. So now that we know Israel is the Most High's witness, out of all the nations on earth, no one's forefathers can say, I saw the Heavenly Father. I saw the chariot. I saw what he did to Egypt. I walked through the Red Sea. Nobody can. I witnessed the 10 plagues. Only our fathers can say that. That's why I say, you my witness. Go ahead, Ezekiel chapter 37 and verse 15.
Ezekiel
Now
chapter
we're reading this to find out why did the Lord say two witnesses. Continue.
Ezekiel chapter 37 and verse 15. The word of the Lord came again unto me, saying, Moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions.
That's talking about Judah, the southern kingdom. Who were Judah's companions represented on that stick? The tribes that consisted of the kingdom of Judah, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Go ahead.
Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions.
Now, who was that? All the house of Israel under Joseph, who was in the hand of Ephraim. That's talking about the kings of the northern tribes of the northern kingdom came out of the tribe of Ephraim, the son of Joseph, the younger son of Joseph. He said, take that stick and write all of his companions. That means all the other tribes. Go ahead.
Verse 17. And join them one to another into one stick, and they shall become one in thine hand.
That means right now, as of now, the Most High still see us as what? As two witnesses, as a divided kingdom. How do we know that? Because we just read that in the last book of the Bible. Revelation 11 said his two witnesses shall prophesy, and there shall be power given to his two witnesses. So we're still in that state until Christ come back and reunify us. Go ahead.
Verse 18.
Salud.
Thank you. Verse 18. And when the children of thy people shall speak unto thee, saying, Wilt thou not show us what thou meanest by these? Say unto them, Thus saith the Lord power. Behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, his fellows, and will put them with him, even with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in mine hand.
Go ahead.
And the sticks whereon thou writest shall be in thine hand before their eyes. And say unto them, Thus saith the Lord power. Behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen, whither they be gone, and will gather them on every side, and bring them into their own land.
Now, this is what we just read in Isaiah 43. He said, I'm going to say to the east, bring my children. I'm going to bring you from the west. I'm going to say to the north, hold back. I'm going to say to the south, bring up my sons and daughters. This is the same thing. Go ahead.
Verse 22. And I'll make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king to them all. And they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms any more at all.
See that? And in other words, there will no longer be two witnesses. Isaiah chapter 43 let us know that Israel is the witness. And Ezekiel chapter 37 is letting us know that because we've been divided, we're two witnesses. That what verse was that, Amiyatazar?
Verse 22.
Okay, thank you. Let's go. Now go back. I can read, pick up where you left off and read verse 3 again in Revelation 11.
Revelation 11, verse 3. And I will give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth.
So this is just talking about the dynamic of the teaching that took place in the United States of America between the years of 1619 and 1969. The Most High never let it die out. The Most High never let the truth die out from us. Go ahead.
Verse 4. These are the two olive trees and the two candlesticks standing before the power of the earth.
Now listen, y'all, we're going to eventually revisit this. Let's do this real quick. When I say revisit this, since we're here, we don't have to revisit it. This is dealt with in Romans 11 as well. In Romans 11, the Most High speaks of having broken off what? The branches of the olive tree. So what we're reading are the two branches that got broken off. Well, let me say this. Go on and through this, Amiyatazar, and we'll come back and revisit this with respect once we get to the corresponding verse in Romans 11. Right now, I came here with the intention of what? Of showing us that Israel, both kingdoms, there was a time when we did rule this whole planet. Go ahead, Amiyatazar, pick up where you left off. Verse 4. He might have stepped away to use the restroom. Go ahead, Dawiyat.
These are the two olive trees and the two candlesticks standing before the power of the earth.
Go ahead.
And if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth and devoureth their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in his manner be killed.
Go ahead.
These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues, as often as they will.
The time is coming when it's going to happen. Go ahead.
And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them
This is talking about the conquest of America that included the kingdoms of the tribes from the kingdom of Israel, and then Judah when Judah was brought over. Go ahead.
And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified.
This is talking about the United States of America, and we see why it's called Sodom. We already know Egypt represents what? It's the land of our captivity, that they keep trying to convince us that we're no longer slaves, that we've been free. But the Edomite, the sodomy is crystal clear with the whole, what do they call this shit? The LGBT movement. With all of that, that's sodomy, man. You remember they got children taking therapy to inhibit or to block their hormones so that they don't completely or successfully complete the puberty process. They call it transitioning. They got little boys making transition to become girls and vice versa. They got them getting operations, getting their genitals mutilated. This is crystal clear. It's talking about America. Go ahead.
And they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves.
Once again, this is speaking, listen, the 42 months, the 1,203 score days, the 3 days and a half, it's all symbolic of the 3.5 centuries that we existed being enslaved and punished by the Most High in relative ignorance. I say relative ignorance because the Most High didn't entirely stamp out the truth. So it's talking about from 1619 to 1969. Go ahead.
And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another.
This is talking about the various products for which Israel was being sold and bought for and with. On the Western Hemisphere, that traffic is referred to as the triangle trade, right? The dynamic that existed between Europe, the Americas, and Africa, where the kingdom, the fallen inhabitants of the kingdom of Judah were being sold to the Americas let's say this, what were the Africans receiving? The Africans were receiving a little bit more advanced weaponry from the steel goods, and they were receiving clothes and the refined product of rum. Those were the big things for the most part that Africans received: textiles, metal goods, specifically weapons, and rum. But then, in exchange for exporting slaves, that's what they received. Now, when the slaves got to America, what did Europe get? Europe got the raw materials that the slaves were being made to work for and produce, right, to pull out of the earth to send to Europe. So Europe was taking all the raw materials, and what were they doing? They were producing refined products with them and then selling those refined products back to their colonists. That's why it's called the triangle trade. It was a dynamic taking place between the Americas, Europe, and Africa. And that same and similar dynamic took place in what's known as the Indian Ocean slave trade. The same dynamic took place in what is known as the Sahara Desert and Red Sea slave trade. It happened all over the whole damn globe. That's what happened. And so that's why the Most High said all nations. The Arabs were doing the same thing. The Hamites were doing the same thing. The peoples of India and Indonesia and all the places where we got sent to, they had to trade goods for us as well, that we worked for in their plantations, that they ended up getting what? Refined products out of. Read verse 10. I'm a Yatazah, you're back. We're down in verse 10 now.
Verse 10. And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth.
Now that's the point. We did all of that just to get to this verse. This verse is linked with what? with Romans chapter 11 and verse 11. In other words, when we fell into this condition, the being sent, being bought and sold, and gifts being given, and us being given as gifts, what happened? The nations were what? Were in their power. They had been released. They had been what? They have received their sovereignty from us. They have received what? Their liberty, and they no longer answer to us. That's what this was about. And that's why the Lord said, when Israel fell, the Gentiles, or salvation came to the Gentiles. That salvation is speaking of sovereignty that we read in Wisdom of Solomon chapter 6. Independence. They now, and not only did they have independence, what? They went about to acquire, now that they had their freedom, they went about to acquire the wealth of the world that was ours. That was why everywhere where we were, they came and took it. That's Deuteronomy. Everything that we sustained ourselves with and built our empires, they came and took all the silver, all the gold. They came and took all the land, all the cattle, and they have it to this very day. That's what verse 11 is saying. So read that verse one more time, Mama Yetazah, verse 10, Revelation 11:10, and then go back to Romans 11 and 11 once more.
Verse 10, and they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth.
Now, it is Esau's time, and even the Most High told him that he wouldn't rule until what? Until he broke our yoke from off of his neck. That's another verse that proves, let's go there. Now, guess what that is? That takes us back to Genesis chapter 27, second half of the chapter, where we found out what happened with Esau. Since Jacob had clearly finagled and deceived his father and gotten Esau's blessing, then what blessing was left for Esau? Let's go back. I'm going to go back to Genesis chapter 27. Genesis chapter 27, and I'll tell you what verse. Yeah, let's do this. I'm yet to. I guess you had just pick up from verse 30.
Genesis 27 and verse 13. And it came to pass, as soon as Isaac had made an end of blessing Jacob, and Jacob was yet scarce gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. And he also had made savory meat, and brought it unto his father, and said unto his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's venison, that thy soul may bless me.
Continue.
And Isaac his father said unto him, who art thou? And he said, I am thy son, thy firstborn Esau.
Go ahead.
And Isaac trembled very exceedingly, and said, who? Where is he that hath taken venison and brought it me? And I have eaten of all before thou camest, and have blessed him. Yea, and he shall be blessed. And when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry, and said unto his father, bless me, even me also, O my father.
Go ahead.
And he said, thy brother came with subtlety, and have taken away thy blessing. And he said, is not he rightly named Jacob? For he hath supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he hath taken away my blessing. And he said, hast thou not reserved a blessing for me?
Yeah, man. Like Isaac was like, well, let me cross my fingers just in case this really ain't Esau. No, he gave him the full blessing. So Esau wanna, is there anything left? Did you save anything for me? Go ahead.
Verse 37. And Isaac answered and said unto Esau, behold, I have made him thy lord, and all his brethren have I given to him for servants. And with corn and wine have I sustained him.
Now,
And what shall I
go ahead.
And what shall I do now unto thee, my son?
So that's showing you, this confirms what I told you in verse 28 and 29. Verse 28, he was given the material wealth of the earth. And in verse 29, all mankind was made his servants. And this is what Isaac is saying. Nah, shit, he got it all. Had this nigga had Esau singing the Whitney Houston song. I have nothing, nothing, nothing. Shit. Go ahead.
Verse 38. And Esau said unto his father, hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept.
He just started crying like a baby. So that means Isaac had to muster. And listen, the only thing that was left to give him was the ability to go and take everything that Jacob got by force.
Yeah.
That was all that was left. I mean, he has everything. So the only thing I can give you is what? Is let's read it. Go ahead, Amiyatazar.
Verse 39. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above.
Now he's saying, listen, that's how he opened up his prayer with Jacob, right? What does it say? Well, somewhat in verse 28, therefore the Most High give thee of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and plenty of corn and wine. That's literally talking about what? It's talking about everything. So Esau is being told something similar, but not as much. Go ahead, Amiyatazar, read that verse once more, verse 39. 39, I'm sorry.
Verse 39. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above.
Go ahead.
And by thy sword shall thou live, and shall serve thy brother.
So listen, you're going to live. What the sword represents warfare. You're going to get the dew of heaven. You're going to get the wealth of the world, but you're going to have to do it through warfare. And you're going to serve your brother still. Read on.
And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck.
But once you get your own kingdom, once you get your own dominion, you shall break your brother's yoke from off of your neck. So when did that happen? Now, this is specifically dealing with Esau, but the same thing happened with other nations. So what happened? Let me show you. The Most High raised up the first Edomite great civilization called the Greeks. And in the process of taking down Darius the Persian, the last Persian emperor, he headed on down and took Jerusalem as well. That was when Esau broke our yoke off of his neck. Now, why does it say that? Let me say this, if we're the Spartans, I forgot about this alliance. Yatazar, look, I got to use the restroom. So while I'm gone, look up the alliance, the Greek alliance against the Spartans, against the Spartan kingdom. Brother, we were so fucking bad down in the Mediterranean, the whole fucking Greek civilization had to come up against us. People don't know it. In other words, this is what happened. The Spartans were never a part of Alexander's kingdom. You ain't going to find that on none of the maps. They weren't even a protectorate. They were bad. They were the ones. Let him look for it. We got to look up the title of that alliance, where the whole Greek world came up against the Spartans. Okay, did you find anything on the exercise?
Yeah, I'll just find it now. It's called the Delian League.
Say that again.
The Delian League.
Yeah, put it up to the yeah, that's what it is. I would like for you to get some so I can read a little bit on it. Let me know when you get it. Because what this goes with, y'all, is showing you that what? That there was a time when Israel ruled Esau until Esau got his own kingdom. And so, but it didn't start with Alexander coming down and doing Jerusalem. First, Sparta had to be, brother, let me say this, we were some ambitious ass dudes, like they'll be talking about the Spartan, the Trojan horse. The Trojan horse wasn't a Trojan horse. The Trojan horse was a Spartan horse that was offered up in the city of Troy because the city was impregnable. Then, and it was fought, that battle was fought over what they call Helen of Troy. It wasn't Helen of Troy, it was Helen of Sparta. But Paris of Troy took Menelaus's wife, who was Helen of Sparta. You saw me fucking up history. The Trojan horse was the horse that the Spartans left on the beaches of Troy with Spartan soldiers inside. Brought it into the city. The Spartan soldiers came and opened the gates and let the rest of the Spartan armies in to sack Troy. And that was done, hold up, that was done over the issue of Paris, of Troy having come and taken, committed adultery and taken Menelaus's wife, Helen. That's what it was. And so his brother Agamemnon is what united the other states to go with Sparta against Troy. That's what happened in that episode, part of the Peloponnesian Wars. My water, what you got?
That movie is about Troy.
Man, the movie's about fucking Hollywood. Bunch of lies. Bunch of damn faggot ass Edomites. But the movie was about that, but it was not accurate at all. All right. I don't know if you're talking about the one that had Brad Pitt.
Yeah, that movie.
The Homo Pitt.
Yeah, I had saw that movie. They was talking about the children.
Yeah. Anything Yetazan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just the second paragraph.
Okay, make it a little bigger. let's see what it says. It says many, damn, brother. Huh, that's cool right there. Shit. Got one big word on my screen. Shit. The Delian League was founded in 478. When it says BCE, that's like before Christ, but they call it before the Common Era. That's what BCE means. Following the Persian War, see this? Now, what happened with the Persian War? This puts this in the same time frame as what? As Sparta. In other words, the movie 300. Following the Persian War, to be a military alliance against any enemies that might threaten Ionian Greece. See, these are different families of Greece. It was led most notably by Athens, who protected all members unable to protect themselves with its massive and powerful navy. Politically speaking, though power was distributed equally with each member receiving one vote, the unofficial leader of the league was most certainly Athens. The rest of the group was comprised mainly of mainly of Greek city-states in Asia Minor. That would be Turkey today, y'all. And Troy was to the northwest. Troy was in the area of Turkey where the state of Washington is in the United States, just to give you some order. Hold on. Okay, that's good. In Asia Minor and the islands of the Aegean Sea, who needed water-based protection from the Persians. Hooker, that's talking about an author that cited that clearly in another book. For the most part, the league was official affirmation of the rift that had formed between Athens and Sparta during and following the war, while the Delian League was required by Athens to submit a monetary tax for the improvement of its massive protective navy. Sparta's Peloponnesian League, the Peloponnesian Wars, like I just mentioned, was required to submit a more common variety of tax, soldiers, because these was the baddest motherfuckers. In fact, at the time, a financial tax was a new phenomenon which ultimately benefited all parties involved. Athens could continue to maintain and improve its massive navy, and league members could find protection for less than it would cost to maintain autonomous forces. Now, hold on. Is there more to this? Because this one sounds like it was a military alliance against, well, let's do this. Many have argued that the formation of the Delian League was as a military alliance against the Persians was simply a pretense for a way to counter Spartan power. The Spartans had been the key player in the defeat of the Persians, you see that? And their victory at Plataea was the one that decided the war. Essentially, there were two competing leagues, the Peloponnesian League and the Delian League, both which stated our aims of destroying Persia. But yeah, let me continue to read this. I'm gonna read it to the end. Essentially, there were two competing leagues, the Peloponnesian League and the Delian League, both with stated aims of destroying Persian influences, but real aims of outdoing the other. As time passed, after the defeat of the Persians, it became clear to the Spartans that the Athenians were growing in power and prosperity at a much quicker rate. The taxes that they were imposing were extremely beneficial for the Athenian economy, and the moving of the Delian League's treasury from vulnerable Delos to well-protected Athens was a clear signal that power was quickly being consolidated into a new Athenian empire. In 431, Sparta and its Peloponnesian League allies declared war on Athens and began the Peloponnesian War, beginning the next phase in the endless competition between the two superpowers. All right. Thank you, Amiyatazar. And so I'm thinking of another league, though. I think the league that I was referring to started with an A, but I'll get that later. Let me see. I guess that is it. Hold on.
It's gonna come.
Yes,
When they say Athens, is that talking about Esau or
it's talking about Esau.
so the Athens were Esau, huh?
The Athenians.
Opinion?
The Athenians were one of the many Edomite Greek, what they call city states.
Okay, got it.
All right. What happened? I'm yet to I'll be having Spanish sources, so I might have. Let me put it like this: the Athenian League. Look up huh?
Yeah, the Athenian League is the same.
Okay, then look up the second Athenian League. Because eventually Alexander would emerge, but he was a Macedonian. But he would take the quote, the Greek world to the next level after the death of his father, Philip II. The point is, there is history that shows what we just read in Genesis chapter 27 and verse 40, where it says, and by thy sword, excuse me, and by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass when thou shalt have the dominion. That right there is speaking of a process that culminated in Alexander's presence. You understand? That thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. So wherever Jacob was, the Most High used the Greeks in that world, and then coming on down, I say that world meaning the Mediterranean world. And then eventually Sparta was crushed. What you could actually do is look on how Sparta, how the Peloponnesian League was defeated. That's the better approach. You understand that? But that's history. That's stuff that they can that they can look into on their own. I'm trying to show you all of this is related to the fall of Israel and how the nations got what? Got sovereign. Now you're seeing when it says these two witnesses tormented them that were on the earth. In other words, it's talking about two kingdoms, but these two kingdoms in the form of Israel and Judah had been scattered all over the world, and wherever we were dominated. Listen, I remember, we were the ones that civilized the continent of Africa. We're the ones that took it to that height after the fall of the Egyptians and the Nubian, the Ethiopian powers. All right. So Yetazah, you can let that go, but you had different leagues, man, for the most part. The Spartan League, put it like this. I don't know. We'll deal with it later. We're not even here talking about necessarily the Spartan leagues or the league, the Peloponnesian League, but we'll deal with that later. Okay, Yetazah, do me a favor. Go back now. Go back to where are we? Read Genesis chapter 27, verse 39 and 40, and then go back to Revelations chapter 12 again. Revelations chapter 11, and read verse 10. All right.
Genesis chapter 27 and verse 39. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling place shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above. And by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother. It shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck.
Right. And that's a process that happened. Like it didn't like whether you want to break it down like it was an event, but it was a process that happened that resulted in what? In Esau, the emerging of his first great empire, that would be the third beast of Daniel, that would be from the third beast of Daniel chapter 7 and moving forward. It would be in Daniel chapter 2, represented by the belly and thighs of brass. But remember, there were kingdoms that came before the Greeks, and they received their sovereignty before the Greeks did from under us. You understand?
Huh.
The Assyrians were used to take out the northern kingdom. The Babylonians were used to break Judah. And then from that point forward, the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans were used to, for the most part, at the end, annihilate us. All of that is what the nations got. And now, once annihilated, as Christ described in Luke chapter 21 and verse 24, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and they shall be led captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. That's up until now. That's the salvation that those nations got. What, like we read, what did we just read? We read in Genesis, and Esau, by thy sword shalt thou live. Look at how is it managing now? Is it not through war and conquest and pillaging and exploiting all the nations for their resources? That's what it is. But this began with Alexander. But for the other nations, it began before. They were the beasts that preceded Alexander. And that's what the world got. And that's why we just read in Revelations chapter 2. What did Christ say? Christ said, he that endured to the end shall I give power to rule the nation, because Christ's going to take it back. Now, I'm going to show you. Real quick, Yetazah. This is chapter 11, right? So jump down to verse 15. Revelation chapter 11 to verse 15.
Revelation chapter 11 and verse 15. And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven, saying, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever.
See that? So that means we're going to take it back. That's why Paul said, until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And their time is up now. How do we know their time is up? Because all of the current events, they are identical to the prophecies concerning the end time. Okay, Yetazah, we're done with that. Let's go back now to Romans chapter 11. Read verse 11 one more time and move on down.
Romans chapter 11, verse 11. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? The Most High forbid, but rather through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy.
Go ahead.
Verse 12. Now if the fall of them be the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness?
Now stop right there. Y'all, like I said, we're not going to fly through this. We're definitely not going to fly through this, because this is what, when I say fly through, meaning I want y'all to understand exactly what everything is saying. So here it says, now if the fall of them be the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them be the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? Paul is not speaking idly. There's no verses where you can find that what he's saying can't be traced back to something. In other words, there's no verse that he mentions, or there's no point that he makes that can't be traced back to something in our history. So he's making reference when it says the diminishing, now if the fall of them be the riches of the world, is talking about the manner through which all the nations receive the riches that they have today. So guess where it really started? Hell, we already know where it started. It started in Babylon. Listen, Let's go now. Like I said, now listen, now we're going to spend time, and I say time, meaning we're not going to fit. Well, I won't say we're not going to finish this evening, but I don't believe we are, because I want to go and read that. So when did our wealth begin to do? Listen, we're going to count out. We're not going to count out. Let's start off with the Assyrians. Let's start off with the northern kingdom. What happened with us? Amayatazar, 2 Kings chapter 17. Start off at verse 1. Let me see how we do this. 2 Kings. And I said chapter 17, but it's chapter 15, 2 Kings chapter 15. Starting off from verses 20, just two verses, verses 27 through 29. Now, what are we going into now? We're showing you how we got diminished in wealth, how our riches were diminished, so that you can see that Paul is not speaking randomly. He's not speaking hypothetically. He's making points about what happened to us, and he's saying, in spite of all that, the Most High still haven't cast us away. We're still not down that we should have, that we can't come back. And that's why I said, if the fall of them be the riches of the world, then how much more their fullness when they come back? That means how much more are they going to receive? So let's read what we lost. Amayatazar, verse 2 Kings chapter 15 and verses 27 through 29.
2 Kings chapter 15 and verse 27. In the 52nd year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekah, the son of Remaliah, began to reign over Israel and Samaria, and reigned 20 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin.
In other words, this is a king years after. Now this is talking about the northern kingdom. All right, in the 50th year of Azariah, king of Judah. That means Judah. This king Azariah had been ruling for 52 years. When what? When Remaliah began to reign over Israel and Samaria. In other words, these are the two kings, and this king had been already reigning when a new one came over the king of the north and reigned 20 years. Go ahead, read verse 28 again.
Verse 28. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin.
So now what is that referring to? That's taking you all the way back to 1 Kings chapter 13. 1 Kings chapter 12 and 13. That was when chapter 11 is when Solomon sinned, and the Most High said, I'm going to take the kingdom from your son. So chapter 12, Rehoboam is a crowned king. He treats Israel evil, and then what? And then creates a new kingdom up north where he reigns in Samaria, and then he establishes idolatry so that the people of his kingdom don't go back down to worship the Most High in Jerusalem and be endeared to them again. So you'd have to go and just read chapter 12 and 13. And so it's saying this king, years later, was still following the apostasy or the idolatry that Jeroboam started, or that Rehoboam started. No, it was Jeroboam. Go ahead, verse 29.
Verse 29. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, came Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and took Ijon, and Ababeth, Makkah, and Genoa, and Kadesh, and Hazor, and Gilead, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and carried them captive to Assyria.
So this is when the wave of the what? Of the Assyrian captivities began with Tiglath-Pileser. And now remember, later on, guess what would happen? Christ would go, not just Christ, before Christ was born. Once these tribes was gone, Israel began to go now and reoccupy those lands. The only place that we didn't occupy that the Assyrians took was what? Was the cities of Samaria, because a king, one of the Syrian kings had brought some people down to take the capital and inhabit it. But all the other cities, Israel began to inhabit. That's why Christ was raised in Galilee of Nazareth. Was he not?
No.
All the apostles were from Galilee of Nazareth, but they were all Judah, because the inhabitants of the kingdom of Judah began to bypass all the cities of Samaria and go back and occupy all the lands of the tribes of the north that had been taken out. And that's why you'll see a few familiar cities here. Read verse 29 once more, Amayetazan.
Verse 29. And in the days of Pekah, king of Assyria, came Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and took Ijon and Ababeth Makkah and Genoa and Kadesh and Hazor and Gilead and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and carried them captive to Assyria.
So those names are familiar. Gilead, that was Gad's land. Galilee, cities of Naphtali. Naphtali was the tribal land. And within that tribal land, you had various cities. This is where Tobit was from. Y'all know that, right? Tobit was from the tribe of Naphtali and was taken from these lands. You read the chapter 1, verses 1 on down, you'll see Tobit can be traced back to here. Okay, now why do we go here? Because we're finding out with all of those lands that were taken, the wealth of them, y'all. When a nation would come and take a country, what did Alexander do? What did these nations? They would put us under tribute, and the bounty of our land would be transferred to them. It wouldn't be no damn paper money. It would be so many tons of wheat, so many tons of corn, so many tons of dates, so many tons of whatever the grains were, so many tons of rice, so many tons of amaranth, so many tons of spelt, so many tons of barley, so many tons of honey, of dates, of prunes, of grapes. And so when they came and took this, boom, they got the wealth of that land. We gotta divorce ourselves from what the idea of wealth is today. Paper money and banks and shit that you don't even actually have the money. And that's not mentioning the gold and the precious metals and the industrial metals. All of the industrial materials, the flax, all of the, like I said, you have to think like that, because that's what Paul is referring to. So now this is where the northern kingdom Israel began to lose wealth and riches with this right here. Amayetazar, from there, go to chapter 16. We're still in 2 Kings, and read verses 5 through 9.
2 Kings chapter 16, verse 5. Then Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem to war.
Now stop. Listen to this. This is when the Israelites of the north united with Syria to come against Judah, their own brothers. But this was the process in which we were falling. What did Christ come back a couple of thousand years later and say? Every nation divided against itself shall not stand. And every house divided is brought to desolation. And this is it. Because now Israel is going up against Israel with another nation. Read it again, Amayetazan.
Verse 5. Then Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem to war. And they besieged Ahaz, but could not overcome him.
Go ahead.
At that time, Rezin, king of Syria, recovered Elath to Syria, and drove the Jews from Elath. And the Syrians came to Elath and dwelt there unto this day.
So here we are, what? Losing territory that we had conquered. Go ahead. The other nations, remember I told you, the Syrians, I said this earlier, they were the first to begin to recover what? Their sovereignty. Go ahead.
Verse 7. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I am thy servant and thy son.
Now
Come
listen, this king of Ahaz is relinquishing himself to the servant of what? Of Tiglath-Pileser, the one who had already came and taken lands from the north all the way up to Galilee and Nazareth. He's getting ready to give over more territory, but not so much territory as wealth. You're going to see it. Go ahead, Amiyatazar. Verse 7 again.
Verse 7. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I am thy servant and thy son. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Syria and out of the hand of the king of Israel, which rise up against me.
Now what happened? So now you have the northern kingdom that's allied to Syria. And so the southern kingdom, Judah, is reaching out to the Assyrians, who had already whooped up on the north. You got two Israelite kingdoms, each united with a different nation to go against each other. And Judah's going to pay dearly for this. Read on down on the Yetazah.
Verse 8. And Ahaz took the silver and gold that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasures of the king's house, and sent it for a present to the king of Assyria.
Like I said, the diminishing of the riches be the wealth of the Gentiles. This is how they got it. It's all in these books. People be trying to go to all these other books. You don't need to read them other books. It's all right here. Go ahead.
Verse 9. And the king of Assyria hearkened unto him, for the king of Assyria went up against Damascus and took it, and carried the people of it captive to Kir, and slew Rezin.
Now this is when Assyria was the top dog. Syria was stronger than us, but Assyria was the empire of the age. This was before the rise of the Babylonians, when the Babylonians would take them and Syria and Egypt. Go and us. Go ahead.
Verse 10. And King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king
Well,
of
that was it.
Assyria.
I just wanted you to read verses 7 or verses 5 through 9. Now we can go to 2 Kings chapter 17. Now, because when we break it down, a lot of times we go right to 2 Kings. You know, when we read Matthew chapter 10, verses 5 through 7. And it says, and he called his 12 disciples and commanded them, saying, go not into the city of the Samaritans, and go not to the Gentiles, excuse me, I'm butchering it. Go not unto the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And then whenever we'll say, well, why did he tell the apostles not to go to the cities of Samaria? Then we always go to 2 Kings chapter 17. But you see, this succession of losses that we suffered began in chapter 15. So by the time you get to Shalmaneser is like the third or the fourth king. Shalmaneser is the second, Sargon is the third, and Sennacherib is the one that finished up the destruction of the northern kingdom. Then when he came down to try to take Judah, the Most High killed his army in the field. So you had a succession of about 3 or 4 Assyrian kings that did away with the northern kingdom little by little. It didn't happen overnight. Then the Most High would have the same thing happen to Judah over what? A period of time that started off in 586 BC and it would finish in 70 AD, close to 600 damn years. The Most High finally made a final end of the kingdom of Judah. So Amiyatazah, you're in 2 Kings chapter 17. We're reading verses 1 through 23.
2 Kings chapter 17 and verse 1. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hoshea, the son of Elah, to reign in Samaria.
So now you see what happened. This is the same Ahaz that in the previous chapter, verse 8, he took silver and gold from the Most High's house to give to the king of Assyria, who had already taken his brothers in the north. But now that the brothers that remained in the north was with the Syrians come up against him, you see how this was a big old divided clusterfuck, man. But this is how all the nations got our wealth. Read on down, Amiyatazah.
2 Kings chapter 17, verse 1. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hoshea, the son of Elah, to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, but not as the kings of Israel that were before him.
That means he was evil, but he wasn't as evil as everybody from Jeroboam, from Jeroboam up to him, up to the previous king. Go ahead.
Verse 3. Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hoshea became his servant and gave him presents.
So you see this, we're reading what? And he gave him presents. Why are we here? Because the scripture said in chapter 11, I'm gonna read it again. In Romans chapter 11 and verse 12, it says the following. Now, if the fall of them be the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them, the riches of the Gentiles, we're showing you it didn't start with Judah. It started with Assyria. And he's talking about what? The whole nation, Paul is. But the fall began with Solomon. And the first to get knocked out completely was the northern kingdom. But not before what? We suffered a division because of Solomon's son. Or I should say, in the time of Solomon's son, but it was because of Solomon. Remember, Most High said, I have taken your kingdom and rented from you, but I will leave thee one tribe. And he did that because he exercised that mercy towards Solomon for David's sake. And that's why he didn't do it in Solomon's time, but he did it in the time or during the reign of Solomon's son, Rehoboam. Are you there, Amiyetazah?
Yeah.
Okay. Verse 3 once more.
Verse 3. Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hoshea became his servant and gave him presents.
Go ahead.
And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore, the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison.
So what happened was the king of Assyria let Hosea stay down in Judah, in Israel and Samaria, so that he could see to that tribute being paid annually. But then one year, this king of Israel decided he ain't gonna pay no tribute, and I'm gonna get Egypt to back me up. And so because of that, there was a year when the tribute didn't come in, the king of Assyria knew it and took his ass, went down and got him and brought him back and put him in an Assyrian prison. But what does it show you? Up until that point, he was paying tribute. That wealth of Israel, the northern kingdom, was being siphoned out. Go ahead. And it was being done through conquest, through servitude. We were no longer sovereign. You see that, right? They had the sovereignty. They were free from what? Rule and oppression, because we were under foreign rule and oppression and tribute. Go ahead.
Verse 5. And the king of Assyria came up throughout all the lands and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria.
And this is my side. I'm sorry. Do me a favor, Amiyetazah, and put up a map of the tribes of Israel, the land of Israel, during the time of David. I say that so that we can get a clear appraisal of the territories, right? And we'll find out what territories the Tiglath-Pileser take. Then we're reading about right now who Shalmaneser took. And this be the issue why, or I should say, going through this process or failing to go through this process is the reason for which the eternal question of what is Romans 11 saying is still in Israel after hundreds of damn years, because the students who became the teachers now just won't go and listen. First of all, many of them only stayed with what they were taught, and they didn't get more curious and go get more. When I say go get more, I'm talking about just go more into the book. Because I didn't get this breakdown like this. I just got Second Kings chapter 17, verses not even 1 through 23, just a few verses. I had to take it upon myself to say, what is the whole chapter saying? Oh shit, this wasn't the first. Let me go back and really study it. Because that's what the Most High have our elders do. They give us a foundation, then we got to build upon the foundation. So here it is, 30-something years later after I came in, and I still got brothers, my peer. Let's see what we got. I was looking for the name, the kingdoms divided, the land of Israel divided by tribes. So you might want to look at that. I'm sorry. Yeah, but it is united, but we want the division of the lands by the tribes. So I'm saying this is how the Bible is supposed to be studied. If there's a reference being made in the New Testament, you're supposed to go back and find it and get everything on the reference, and then the New Testament, whatever you're reading, it becomes clearer. Okay, Asher. Let's see, Ephraim, Benjamin. All right. Now listen, I want you to stay there. I'm going to go back to chapter 15, and I'm going to read verse 20 and 29 again. All right. Keep that map there. And in the days of Pekah, king of Israel, came Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and took Eon. What I guess mine says Eon because it's got an old English. It might not say that. Abel Beth Maacah, and Janoah, and Kadesh, and Hazar Gilead. Now look at all the Gilead there, east of the Jordan. That's what they took. All right. Naphtali. Let me see. They just have 1, 2. I don't know why they don't have all the tribes. But at any rate, there you have it. So let's put it like this. Everything from Jezreel to the north, and then from the Jordan to the east, that Gilead, that's what got taken by Tiglath-Pileser. What was left is everything that's in the realm of Ephraim, but not Benjamin. Benjamin would stay with Judah. All right. That up there that says Jezreel and Asher. It would. Oh, this is good. I'm gonna have to go call your verse out and read again from where you left off in chapter 17. All righty. There you go. All right, look at Naphtali, look at Asher, East Manasseh, Gad, West Manasseh, not yet. But there you have it. For the most part, you got Naphtali, Asher. Let me see something. Asher, Naphtali, East Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben. All of that got taken by Tiglath-Pileser. Then the other kings would come and eventually take Zebulun, Issachar, West Manasseh, Ephraim, Dan, right? But they would only occupy the land of Ephraim. Okay? Simeon down there would go to Judah kingdom, that would become part of Judea. And so all the lands that were taken, with the exception of what you see, Ephraim and that purple in the middle, Israel began to reoccupy those. And in the time of Christ, all of the apostles were living in, raised in, born in, with the exception of Christ. Christ was born down in Bethlehem in the city of David, but when he came back out of Egypt, his parents, they went up and they dwelt, and he was raised in Naphtali, in the city of Galilee of Nazareth. That's where he was at. All right, I'm gonna get this. I thank you, but that was a good one, actually. Okay, chapter 17, what verse was it that you had read?
Up to verse 5, I believe.
Okay, go ahead.
2 Kings chapter 17, verse 5. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the lands and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years.
Go ahead.
In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Hala and in Habor by the river of Gozan and in the cities of the Medes.
That means he placed us up in what would be northern Iran today. The Medes, the land of the ancient Medes is northern Iran, and the land of the ancient Persians is southern Iran. So this is when we got taken up into the Medes by the Assyrians. Go ahead.
Verse 7. For so it was that the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord their power, which had brought them up out of the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods.
So we started getting into idolatry. Go ahead.
Verse 8. And walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel.
That means
and
we began to follow the Canaanite customs and their idolatries and the Philistines and all of those people that the Most High ran out of there. Go ahead.
And of the kings of Israel, which they had made. Verse
That means
9.
we began to, Judah, man, this is called Israel also began, when it says in the kings of Israel, it's talking about from Jeroboam on down, the kings of the northern kingdom. Go ahead.
Verse 8. And walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel, which they had made. And the children of Israel did secretly those things that were not right against the Lord their power, and they built them high places in all their cities, from the tower of the watchman to the fenced city.
Check this out. That means we were secretly just building little bitty groves all over the land of Israel. Go ahead.
Verse 10. And they set them up images and groves in every high hill and under every green tree. And there they burnt incense in all the high places, as did the heathen, whom the Lord carried away before them, and wrought wicked things to provoke the Lord to anger.
Continue.
Verse 12. For they served idols, whereof the Lord had said unto them, You shall not do this thing. Yet the Lord testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, Turn ye from your evil ways, and keep my commandments and my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, which I sent to you by my servants, the prophets.
Go ahead.
Notwithstanding, they would not hear, but hardened their necks like to the neck of their fathers, that did not believe in the Lord their power. And they rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers, and his testimonies which he testified against them. And they followed vanity and became vain, and went after the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom the Lord had charged them that they should not do like them. And they left all the commandments of the Lord their power, and made them molten images, even 2 calves, and made a grove, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served Baal.
Go ahead.
And they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire.
So you can't forget that. We was burning our children up alive. That's a hellish, in every sense of the word, fate to die, man. To be burnt alive, an infant. Go ahead, Amayetazan. Call the verse out.
Verse 17. And they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire, and used divination and enchantments, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger.
Child sacrifice, casting spells, fucking a divination. Enchantments is casting spells. A divination is like divining the future. what do you call it, future telling, palm reading, tarot card reading, telling people, you know, their future and shit. You can listen, like, you look at us in the ghettos and slums and the barrios, and you can't see us doing that. Now remember, we're reading about the Northern Kingdom. We're reading about the Indians, as they like to say, and the Hispanics. The Negroes would move on to do, the scriptures say they would even do worse. You read Ezekiel chapter 16 and 20 and 16 and chapter 23, it says that Judah did worse than Israel. So in this verse, we're reading about how our forefathers burnt our sons and daughters, how we cast spells and shit. That's enchantments, and how we were divination, we were doing all type of prognosticating, you know, trying to, you know, get into them force that so that you could, you know, like if a nigga wanted to know who gonna win the horse race, or who's gonna win a certain football game, that would be divination today. Why? So that you could load up and place your bets on that shit. That's what we were doing, huh? Go ahead, I'm sorry. You got to read all the way down to 23. We're almost done.
Verse 19, verse 18, sorry. Therefore, the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only. Also, Judah kept not the commandments of the Lord their power, but walked in the statutes of Israel, which they made.
So Judah began to do all the evil, the burning up the kids, the enchantments, the casting spells, the divinations. Go ahead.
Verse 20. And the Lord rejected all the seed of Israel and afflicted them and delivered them into the hand of spoilers until he had cast them out of his sight.
Now he's going to start. That verse is a summary. Now, verse 21 going to give you a little bit of history. Then it's going to tell you what happened beginning with the kingdom of Israel. Go ahead, Amiyetazan.
Verse 21. For he rent Israel from the house of David, and they made Jeroboam the son of Nebat king.
So that's back in 1 Kings chapter 12. Go ahead.
And Jeroboam drave Israel from following the Lord and made them sin a great sin.
Go ahead.
Verse 22. For the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. They departed not from them.
That's from 1 Kings chapter 7, chapter 12. Chapter 12, all the way to 2 Kings right here that we're reading, chapter 17. I wouldn't stop. Go ahead.
Verse 22. For the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. They departed not from them until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said by all his servants, the prophets. So was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day.
And so that marked the end of the northern kingdom. And that's where we'll pause tonight. We're going to read some more next week. Remember, where are we stuck at right now? Right now, we're stuck at Romans chapter 11 and verse 12. And we're finding out about what it means when it says the combination of verse 11, the fall of them be the salvation of the Gentiles, and then the riches. We're reading a combination of that. We're reading them being freed up to take us captive, and at the same time commandeer our wealth. This is what Paul is talking about. Then he goes to starting to refer to both the kingdoms as the branches or the olive tree, that were the branches of the olive tree that were broken off. That's when we're going to have to go back to Revelation chapter 11 again and read verse what? Read verse like 5, where it says, these are the two olive trees. That's the whole point. Everything, Paul is not speaking anything random. It's just Israel don't want to really do their study. And they want to be all into other books and come across as all deep and shit. When it's all it's all here between Genesis and Revelation. The Gospels are not difficult at all. You just got to know what each prophet, what Christ, what Paul, and everyone, whoever the authors are of the epistles of the New Testament, you got to know what it is they're referring to. That's all. So we'll call it here, because if I go to the next one, that's going to be a little longer. That's going to be the whole. We're going to go from here next. When we pick up next time, we're going to go to what? We're still reading about what? We're still reading about the northern kingdom only. We're going to continue in 2 Chronicles and read chapter 36 about the southern kingdom as well. We're going to really understand what Romans chapter 11 is saying. That's the objective. That's our mission. Okay, so with that, I'm going to say shalom to y'all, brothers. I'm Yektazar.
Yeah, shalom.
See you tomorrow, man. You're going to be there in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Okay, brother, I'll see you. Shalom.
All right, shalom.
Yeah, you guys, we're getting off a little early, but only because if we continue, then I don't want to stop in the middle of what we're reading with 2 Chronicles chapter 36. So we'll call it a few minutes early. It's only 9 minutes early. All right. All right, y'all have you a powerful week, man. I'll see you guys next Friday. Stay prayed up and trust the Most High, all right? All right, shalom, brothers.
Wow.